Hey Pirates family, it's Coach McKay. Um, I'm up at a teacher training conference and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be at the game tonight. Tight game, and they're going to be like this all the way up to the very end. Um, and so, in some ways, I'm glad for the things that are happening, and hopefully we can learn the most from these lessons. But I just felt prompted to share something that I'm actually training at this conference on. I'm at a conference with teachers, and I recently read this book called Atomic Habits. At one point, the author makes an interesting observation that I think is beneficial for teachers and parents and coaches. Whenever we're trying to learn something and we set goals, we always have this trajectory that we think should be happening. If we do this, then I should be getting these results, and it should be happening at a linear rate. But studies have shown, and we can know, that most of our growth is small incremental changes that are almost imperceptible at the beginning, but over a longer period of time compound together, and then we see tremendous growth on the back end. And it's hard to recognize this growth because it's not happening when we want it to. But eventually we get there, and when we look back, we can see all the small changes that came over time. When we compare what we think should be happening to what is actually happening, we see a lack of growth and enter the valley of disappointment. Well, I've noticed that this valley of disappointment is compounded when we also layer on top of it what we think our parents think should be happening in our lives, or what we think that coaches think should be happening in our performance. So we already have our own valley of disappointment. Now we're adding on top of that the disappointment of our parents or coaches or bosses' expectations, whatever it may be. It's at this point as a teacher that I look at this situation and what are we to do to help our students get through the valley of disappointment, to help my players deal with this discouragement when I actually see growth happening in everyone. It's just not visible yet to them because things aren't happening the way they think they should be. Real learning and real growth happens when we take advantage of this valley of disappointment and we instead call it the valley of humility or inquiry. If we can take the disappointment and let it teach us and cause us to ask questions, then at this point we can convert this disappointment into real growth and learning. And so this is to me what a coach and parent and teacher's job is to help someone who's not recognizing the growth in their life because they think it should be happening this way, when really they're growing. It's just so small and imperceptible that they can't see it yet. How do I help them endure the valley of disappointment so they can get to the point later on in their progression where they cross that threshold and even exceed or excel past their expectations? Usually that is done through asking good questions. You can't ask questions of players or students when they're fully discouraged and emotional. That's where humility comes in. And by humility, I mean teachability. You're in a state where you are willing to accept feedback. That's not necessarily in the moment when you're failing or frustrated, but after the fact, you can learn some very powerful lessons reflecting back on the disappointment. Let me illustrate this. When I was in high school, I was a football player, and I was not very good until my senior year. The coach pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you've worked really hard. We think you deserve a shot at a position of your choice, except it being quarterback, because we already had one. Any position you want, it's yours until you lose it." So I decided to be a defensive back. And the coach was surprised because I'd never played that position before, but I thought I could do it. He gave it to me to his word. He let me keep it until I lost the position. Well, a third game into the season, I had retained my position and we were doing well. And then it came down to the final minutes where we had a 12-6 lead against Carlsbad. They got the ball back and they were driving with about a minute 30 left in the game. I'm going to play this play here, and you'll see I get pretty involved. The quarterback drops back, and I am in perfect position to make a play here. Maybe not perfect, but pretty close. And you'll see Brandon Rogers go up, make a play. I do everything I can, and he catches the ball. Now you can see my valley of disappointment. He's out on the 2-yard line. There's still some time left on the clock, and so we have to stop him. The first play is a run play. We stuff him at the line of scrimmage. You can see number 7 here in the corner is super excited. That's me. I'm trying to save my position, to save my job, and not lose the game. The next play, the offense comes to the line, and you'll see they shift. Now, as they shift, what this does is changes the responsibility for the different players. All of a sudden, I am now responsible. They do a play action fake handoff, and the guy I'm responsible for is wide open in the corner of the end zone. I dive and enter the valley of disappointment. We end up losing the game 13-12. It was the only loss for our team in that regular season. But all I could think about in my head was that I had lost the game and that my position as a defensive back was gone. I had lost it and I wasn't getting it back. So my whole world came crashing down because everything I worked for was about to be taken away from me. That night, when I finally got home around midnight, my dad had a bottle of Martinelli's apple cider, and he was waiting for me on the couch. And he opened the apple cider and he poured me a glass, and we started having this conversation, and he looked at me and said, "We have to celebrate the bad times because the good times will make up for themselves." I was so confused, but he understood better than I did that I was growing, that my change and growth had been imperceptible to me. What was actually happening was real growth. What I thought was happening was creating this disappointment. Fortunately, I did not lose my position. In fact, I finished the season as a defensive back and was voted CIF second team all-league defensive back. My father waited for me to come home, and with good timing, said an inspired, kind of taught me an important principle and asked an important question. Are we going to celebrate the bad times? Are we going to learn from them? If we can, over time, our children will eventually be able to look back on their life, and what they thought was happening will begin to slowly disappear. And what actually happened in their life will become more apparent to them. And that this valley of disappointment will disintegrate into a season of joy and rejoicing because of the things that we learned and who we became during that difficult time period of growth. Life is full of valleys of disappointment. This is an 11-year-old version of disappointment. But we can easily see that life will offer more heavy disappointments. But with each valley comes intense learning. And if we can learn these lessons now, early in life, then they are prepared to take on some more difficult challenges. This is one of my favorite videos on how to deal with being at the bottom.
People who don't make any changes in their life don't have any courage. That's the bottom line, because they're too afraid. It takes courage to make any kind of change in your life. Courage to stop doing these things, the courage to stop acting like that, to break these patterns in my life, to break these addictions, to break it all.
What does it take to survive the Volcom house?
First you have to approve a cyborg. After that, pretty much everything's gravy.
Just gotta be on and ready to go. Ready to fire your guns when it's time to fire. Kyborg, what are you doing in the North Shore?
Running it. I run the whole program.
You know, but the bottom is a beautiful thing, because that's when the miracle is going to happen of change in your life. I was spiritually, emotionally, physically bankrupt. My bottom was actually the high point of my life, because that's when my whole life switched to the right direction. Motivation has nothing to do with anything I do. It's all discipline. Waking up early, 4 or 5 o'clock. I pray, work out, but there's always a structure to my whole day of what I do. It's not because I have to. I get to. It's a privilege. I don't like the word happy. Happy's temporary. I like joyful. That's spiritual and long meaning. What's your daily living every day with your family and your friends and your community? Like being able to live your passions. That's joy. Today I'm a husband, a father, a son, a brother, a God-fearing man. Everything else is immaterial. You just want to be a good person overall in your life. That's who I am today. The 3 keys I live by: stay humble, stay open-minded, and stay teachable. You know, I'm learning more now than ever. On the mat, in the ocean, everyday interactions with my family. Life is about choices. If you want a hard life, make easy choices. If you want an easier life, make those hard choices. It's real simple.
The bottom is a beautiful thing. I love this team. I love this season. Whether we finish on top or on the bottom, being together is a beautiful thing.